My alarm goes off at 6 a.m., and the sun will not rise for another 3 months. It is pitch black outside. It is pitch black inside my head. I am currently living in Longyearbyen, Svalbard, which is roughly 800 miles from the North Pole. This is the northernmost town on Earth, where humans legally pretend they can survive. My job description is pretty straightforward on paper. I am the guy who watches the freezer where humanity keeps its ultimate backup drive. If civilization collapses tomorrow, my job is to protect 1 billion frozen seeds. So when the apocalypse hits and everyone else is fighting over the last drops of gasoline, you can count on me to show up to the wasteland with a really solid crop of heirloom radishes. But that is the value promise of my entire existence. I am guarding the ultimate insurance policy for a species that regularly deletes its own tax documents by accident. To get to work, I have to put on 3 layers of thermal underwear that smell faintly of despair. I put on a jacket thick enough to survive a re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Then I step outside into -30 degrees. The air out here does not just feel cold. The air feels personally offended by my presence. I start up a snowmobile that makes a sound like a lawnmower drowning in gravel. My commute involves driving through a valley of pure, unadulterated nothingness. There are no trees. There are no traffic lights. There is just a giant concrete wedge sticking out of the side of a sandstone mountain, like a forgotten cyberpunk monument. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, and it has been sitting here since 2008. It looks like the lair of a movie villain who gave up on world domination and decided to open a high-end organic grocery store instead. I park the snowmobile and walk up to the entrance. The entrance is decorated with a piece of public art made of steel and mirrors that reflects the polar night. It is supposed to represent the eternal light of human knowledge. Right now. It just looks like a giant frozen neon sign that says, "Nobody is home." I unlock the heavy outer door. The sound of the lock clicking echoes across the entire valley. Inside the tunnel stretches 130 meters straight into the solid rock. It is completely silent, except for the hum of the refrigeration units. The hum sounds exactly like the server room of a tech company that went bankrupt in the 90s. I walk down the tunnel, leaving footprints in the light frost that covers the floor. This is not a glamorous job. I am essentially a glorified night watchman for 1 trillion frozen plants. But the inventory inside this mountain is where the reality of the situation starts to get genuinely weird. We have over 1 million distinct seed samples stored in this freezer. It is the largest collection of agricultural biodiversity on the planet. Think of it like iCloud. Except instead of your embarrassing high school photos, it is 400,000 varieties of wheat. And just like iCloud, nobody actually knows how to restore it from backup without looking at a manual. The seeds are stored in 3 massive rooms, buried deep inside the permafrost. Each sample is sealed inside a 3-ply foil packet. Those packets are packed into plastic boxes. The boxes are stacked on heavy metal shelves that look like they were purchased from an industrial liquidation sale. The rules inside the vault are absolute. The most important rule is the principle of the sovereign black box. When a country sends its seeds here, they remain the exclusive property of that country. I am not allowed to open the boxes. The United Nations is not allowed to open the boxes. Even if I am dying of boredom and want to see what a 500-year-old Mongolian kidney bean looks like, I cannot touch them. This creates some beautiful geopolitical comedy on the freezer shelves. Right now, on shelf number 4, the North Korea box is sitting right next to the United States box. They are sharing a shelf like passive-aggressive college, roommates who do not want anyone touching their orange juice. They have been sitting there in perfect harmony for over a decade. The seeds do not care about nuclear sanctions. The seeds do not care about capitalism. They just care about staying at -18 degrees Celsius. -18 is the magic number. It is the temperature where biological time basically stops. If you keep a seed at -18, it can sleep for thousands of years without losing its mind. My job is to make sure that temperature does not change by even half a degree. If the temperature drops to -19, the seeds are fine, but the corporate paperwork becomes a nightmare. If the temperature rises to -17, the seeds might realize they are stuck in a frozen mountain in the middle of nowhere and give up on life completely. So I walk the aisles with a digital clipboard, checking the digital readouts on the walls. It turns out that nature is actually a way better backup generator than the local power grid. The vault is carved so deeply into the sandstone mountain that even if the electricity completely dies, the permafrost will keep the rooms frozen for decades. It is a comforting thought. If humanity manages to blow up the power grid because of a Twitter argument, the seeds will barely notice. Of course, a perfect freezer does not mean much when the local wildlife treats the entrance like an all-you-can-eat buffet. That brings us to the security policy of the vault. People always ask me if we have high-tech laser grids or armed guards patrolling the perimeter. We do not. We do not need them because the environment does the profiling for us. If you are a thief trying to steal 1 million seeds, you have to fly to a remote island, rent a snowmobile, drive into a blizzard, and then face the local HR department. The local HR department consists of approximately 3,000 polar bears. There are more polar bears on Svalbard than there are actual human beings. They are the real security guards here, and they do not require a pension plan. By law, anyone leaving the main settlement of Longyearbyen must carry a high-powered rifle. I have a rifle strapped to my shoulder right now. I have never shot a polar bear. I never want to shoot a polar bear. Polar bears are essentially 300-pound killing machines made of pure muscle and white fur. If a polar bear decides it wants to audit the seed vault, my plan is to give it the keys and show it where we keep the frozen corn. The rifle is mostly there to make me feel like I am in an action movie instead of a documentary about frozen logistics. The real threat out here is not an international super spy trying to steal the secrets of the commercial soybean. The real threat is the isolation. When you spend 8 hours a day inside a mountain surrounded by millions of sleeping plants, your mind starts to play tricks on you. You start to have conversations with the boxes. I spent 20 minutes yesterday wondering if the Icelandic barley box was judging my outfit. But it is a very specific kind of loneliness. It is the feeling that you are the last person left on the ship, even though the ship is currently parked on a stable tectonic plate. But every now and then, something happens that reminds you why this giant freezer exists in the first place. Most people think the vault is just a monument that will sit here until the sun burns out. They think it is a passive museum for the end of the world. But the backup drive has actually been plugged in before. In 2015, the vault received its first ever withdrawal request. The request came from an organization called ICARDA. They are the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas. They used to have their main seed bank located in Aleppo, Syria. But then the Syrian civil war broke out. The facility was cut off. The researchers had to flee. And the local seed bank was effectively compromised by geopolitical chaos. Decades of research on drought-resistant crops were about to vanish from the face of the earth. But before the conflict started, they had sent duplicates of their entire collection to Svalbard. They called in their backup. We went into the freezer, located the specific boxes, and shipped them back down south. They took those seeds to Lebanon and Morocco. They planted them in the soil, they grew the crops, harvested the new seeds, and multiplied the collection. And then, a few years later, they shipped the duplicates back to Svalbard to refill their account. It actually worked. It was the cosmic equivalent of dropping your phone in the toilet, buying a new one, and realizing all your contacts are still there. That was the moment the vault stopped being a conceptual art piece about the future and became a real tool for the present. It turns out humanity is remarkably good at breaking its own things. But we are also surprisingly decent at building safety nets. So I look at the shelves differently now. This is not just a collection of dead data. This is a library of survival strategies written by 10,000 generations of anonymous farmers. Every packet of seeds represents a time when an ancient human looked at a wild grass and decided to spend the next 30 years making it edible. They did the hard work. My job is just to make sure their homework does not melt. Which brings me back to the daily routine of the shift. After checking the temperature logs, I have to perform the highly technical task of wiping frost off the security cameras. The frost forms constantly because the air inside the tunnel meets the freezing cold from the mountain. It is an endless battle against condensation. If I do not wipe the lenses, the security feed in Oslo just looks like a white screen. They will think the vault has been consumed by a localized blizzard, or that I have finally lost my mind and covered everything in shaving cream. So I walk from camera to camera with a microfiber cloth humming to myself. I look at the digital monitors. The monitors show that everything is completely normal. The world outside is still spinning. Or at least it was when I checked my phone 3 hours ago. That is the weirdest part about working here. If the world actually does end while I am on shift, I might not find out for days. The internet connection in the mountain is reliable. But if the main servers in Europe go dark, my screen will just show a loading icon. I will be sitting here in the dark, wondering why my video will not buffer, while the rest of humanity is learning how to hunt with spears again. I would be the richest man in the wasteland, standing on top of a mountain of food that cannot be eaten without a tractor and a functioning ecosystem. It is the ultimate existential joke. I have all the ingredients for a pizza, but the oven has been destroyed by a meteor. I finish my rounds and walk back toward the entrance tunnel. The heavy steel door shuts behind me with a loud thud that signals the end of the shift. I step back out into the Svalbard afternoon, which looks exactly like the Svalbard morning. It is still dark. The stars are out, and the northern lights are stretching across the sky in green ribbons. They look beautiful, but they also look incredibly cold. I get back on the snowmobile and start the engine. As I drive away from the wedge of concrete, I look back at it through my frosted goggles. It is just a small gray dot against the massive white mountain. We are a very fragile species, living on a very volatile rock. We spend most of our time fighting over lines drawn on maps and arguing about things that will not matter in 5 years. But occasionally, we do something genuinely smart. We build a giant freezer in the Arctic to save ourselves from our own stupidity. It is a monument to our fear, but it is also a monument to our hope. So if you are sitting at home right now, worrying about the future of the world, just remember one thing. Your backup drive is currently running at -18 degrees, and the polar bears are keeping an eye on it. So what about you? Are you the type of person who backs up their data every week? Or are you just going to hope for the best when the hard drive starts making a clicking sound? Let me know down there. I drive back down into the valley toward the faint lights of the town, looking forward to a very hot cup of terrible coffee.